Hello and welcome back to you for the very first time to the channel. I am William Gwyn and today I'm very excited to be talking about my 2022 book stats. Yes, we're in 2023 now. It still feels a bit weird. 2022 went so quickly, and so yes, I'm going to be talking about some book stats. If you follow the channel for a while, you know I love a good stat, a good graph, and when you add books into the mix, it just can't get better. So first up, I'm going to be talking about how many books I read in 2022. So I read 106 books in 2022. On my Goodreads, it will say 107 because of Storm of Swords Part 1 and Part 2. It's so big it was split into two, but I'm counting that as one. So 106 books, which is the most I have ever read in the year. So I'm very happy with that. I've never read that amount in an annual year before, so as I said, very pleased with that. My goal was 65, I think, so yeah, I surpassed that by quite a bit. So yeah, I'll be upping my goal this year to 100. I mean, these goals, they don't need any pressure with them, but I just like to have them there as the word says, as a goal. But if I fall short, doesn't matter. The more books, the better in my mind, and I'm very happy that I've read 106 books. And in those 106 books, there were 42,285 pages. So again, this was a record for me. The most pages I'd read in a year, I think, were 31,000. So I increased that by about a third, which is crazy because I thought I didn't read as much last year as I did in 2020, but in 2021, sorry, getting mixed up with all the years now. But yeah, so really happy with that as well. The more pages, the better. It goes alongside the more books, the better. The biggest book I read was A Storm of Swords by George R. R. Martin. As I said earlier, this is so big, it was split into two, but together it was 1,344 pages. That's how many pages this edition is, and that is a chunky chunker of a book. Crikey, 1,344 pages. That's a lot of books, about 300 pages. I could have read 4, but it was definitely worth it. Storm of Swords was absolutely brilliant, and I will have a short review on the channel soon if it's not out already, so hopefully you do check that out. In short, I loved it. And then we go all the way to the short end. What is the shortest thing I read? And that is Island of the Fae, a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, and it was a grand 6 pages. So yeah, and this was one of my least favourite of the short stories I read by him, so I don't really remember too much of it. So yeah, that's Island of the Fae, and that's all I can say about that. And with those stats, I did some calculations, you know me, and the average book length was 399 pages, so just short of that 400 page mark. So it's weird, I read quite a wide variety of genres as well as book lengths, because in fantasy, books are typically longer than other genres, but I read a lot of historical fiction this year, a few short stories which brought down the average page count dramatically. But yeah, 399 pages, it's quite a big book. And then I've put into categories kind of what genres did I read the most. So in fantasy, I included mythology and historical fantasy in there. So a grand amalgamation of quite a few of the genres I've read this year. So in the fantasy bracket, I read 54 books. So just over half of everything I read. So yes, 54. It shows the main genre that I read, because as I'll show you, so historical fiction, I read 23. So less than half of the fantastical things that I read. Of course, there's a few like Shauna Lawless's The Children of Gods and Fighting Men, which is historical fantasy, so it's got elements of both, but as it's got fantasy in it, I put it in the fantasy bracket. It's in the name. But so yeah, it shows there my top 2 genres. The rest, so if 54, 23, so there's about 29 books that I've read of other genres. So there's some fiction, some crime, some horror, some short stories and more. But so yeah, I've read quite a wide variety of books, but most of them, as you can see from those stats, are fantasy. See, this is why stats are so awesome. I need to spread the stats love. It can tell you what you read the most, what you should do this year. It's just great. Before I get into who my most read author for 2022 was, sorry to push that back a second, but first I want to say thank you to everyone who has watched and supported the channel in 2022. I think this video will be coming out in the 2nd week of January, or maybe the 3rd one, but we're in the first few days at the moment, so I've got a bit of content planned. And so, as I said, thank you so much. I did not think I'd reach 1,000 subscribers within a year, yet alone in the first week of putting the channel up, and it's just crazy that I've got 1,400 as I'm recording this. So I'm so happy to have this channel to be talking about books, and thank you to everyone, as I said, for watching, but also for commenting down below all the books that you're loving, book recommendations, talking about the books that I've talked about. I absolutely love getting engaged with that, because why did I set the channel up? To talk more about books, to geek out about them. So as I said, thank you so much. Do subscribe to the channel if you want to follow more of this content. But now let's get into the good stuff and carry on talking about these book stats. So my most read author was Bernard Cornwell. Of course it was Bernard Cornwell. I've read a lot of his Saxon Stories books in 2022, and they're the only books I read by him. So it's a 13 installment series, and I only have one left. So I started it in 2021, and I got through the biggest chunk of it in 2022, and hopefully I'll be reading the finale early in 2023. So yes, this series will span 2 years of reading, but yes, it is a chunky series. 13 installments is a lot, so I had to spread it out a bit. But finally getting to the end, and Bernard Cornwell, he's one of my favourite authors out there. Some of his books last year I was a bit disappointed by, but others were absolutely brilliant, and it kind of balances out all being a great experience. And I highly recommend the Saxon Stories and the works of Bernard Cornwell, particularly the Warlord Chronicles. So now onto the most books that I've read in a month, and the best reading month for me was March in 2022, and I read 17 books. I think 2 or 3 were short stories, but March was just one of those months where, whereas I read every single month, March was just a blinding sprint of reading. I was just absolutely obsessed, and so yeah, I read a lot in March. I mean, I say that though, it's a lot for me, but I saw Andrews Wizardly Reads. His middle name isn't Wizardly and his last name isn't Reads, well, as far as I know anyway, but Andrews Wizardly Reads channel, he read 200 books, I think over that actually, in 2022. So he was averaging 16 or 17 books a month. So yeah, that just puts me to shame, doesn't it? But then my most pages in a month, so you'd think it would be the same as the most books in a month, but no, it was actually in February. I read 16 books in February, and the page count was 6,131 pages. So as I said earlier, I read 42,200 and, just checking the stat, 85 pages in 2022. So it was about 3,500 each month. So nearly double that in February to get to 6,131 pages in a month. So yeah, I was happy, very happy. I was obviously absolutely loving everything I was reading in February and March. When you get that kind of gold string of books, I think I read Gates of Fire, Let the Right One In, The Pagan Lord, 3 of my probably top 6 or 7 books of the year, and I read them in quick succession, so it was really just firing me up, and I was on that reading rampage. The first book that I read in 2022 was Gunslinger, so the first installment in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. So I listened to this on Audible, and the narrator was good, but I think it didn't quite click with me. I'm not sure if Stephen King's writing translates as well to Audible. Maybe it does, but it just didn't quite with me, so it wasn't the best way to kick off my reading year, because I think I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. But I will definitely be revisiting this book, and I will read it physically this time, because I had a chat with Philip Chase alongside of my brother, and yeah, Philip Chase very kindly had us on his channel, had us reprobates talking about books, and he was talking about Stephen King's Dark Tower series, and I was like, I need to try this out again, and I was feeling that urge to pick them up. Philip Chase just has a way to make me want to read every single book that he's reading as well. The way he talks about them, it just makes me think I'm going to absolutely love this. And so yeah, it's dangerous watching his channel because so many books are added to the TBR, but I think this will be a good one. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting back to Dark Tower, but sadly I didn't really enjoy it in the Audible format. And then my last read of 2022 was Dreaming the Eagle by Amanda Scott, the first book of the Boudica Quartet, and this was not the happiest way to end 2022, because this is in my top 10 favourite books of all time. It was absolutely incredible. The characters are brilliant. The immersive nature of the writing, I just loved these characters. And it feels so epic. It's historical fiction with a smaller cast, but it felt so epic at the same time. And that kind of contrast of the more intimate story at the centre with an overarching, greater story. I just love that combination. And Amanda Scott really executed it to perfection. But saying perfection doesn't mean that you're going to be happy at the end of it. I cried, I was absolutely distraught, and oh my gosh, my mouth was just open, I was just gaping. I think Papa Gwyn or Ed actually took a video of me just in absolute shock as I was reading Dreaming the Eagle. Shock in a, well, can you call crying and being like emotionally ripped apart good in the service of having a memorable reading experience? And it was memorable in a good way. There's just no word for it, but it was amazing. That's the word for it. It was absolutely amazing. So yeah, make sure that you're ready to cry if you try this out, but it's one that I definitely recommend to everyone. And to end the year on one of my favourite books ever is pretty cool. And then I read 51 audiobooks in 2022, so under half, but still quite a lot. So I do quite a bit of walking and just things like that, or if I'm traveling, then I have an audiobook in, and it's when sometimes I don't want to take a book out because I might damage it, or if I'm going somewhere, but I can just put my headphones in. And I don't do it if I'm working on something because I can't concentrate, but if I'm walking, I'm just on the side of the pavement walking forward. There's not much concentration required in that, so I can manage to listen to the audiobook as I'm doing that. So yeah, got through 51 audiobooks, and then the number of different authors. I mean, this really surprised me. I used to binge read series. I used to never go on to another series until I'd finished the one I was reading, but wow, times have changed, and this stat is going to show you how much. So I read 65 different authors, the works of 65 different authors. I read 106 books in 2022. So there's 41 books that were repeats of the same author, and 7 of those were Bernard Cornwell. So there's 35 books that I read. So I read 2 books by an author in 2022. That definitely needs to change again, because I've got so many ongoing series. I think about 50, 54, 55, something like that. And yeah, I need to wrap them up. So one of my goals for 2023 is to wrap up more series than I begin. So that'll be an interesting challenge, and it'll be big. I'm not sure if cool is the word. It'll be cool, but maybe disparaging or maybe motivating when at the end of the year I look back at my goals and plans and see if I achieve them. So there we go. They are my book stats. Hopefully you enjoyed me talking about them as much as I made them. I doubt it, because I absolutely loved looking at these stats. As I said, I'm a stats person, so yeah, this is made for me. That yearly summary is a great time. And so yeah, thank you so much for watching. It was really interesting kind of breaking this down. Hopefully you enjoyed parts of it as well. And again, thank you to everyone who's supported the channel in 2022. I'm really looking forward to a lot of content in 2023. Recently raised the content to 3 videos a week, so there'll be more and more out there. Sorry if you have to listen more to my boring voice. But as I said again, thank you, and stay safe.